This is a feature from bbclearningenglish.com. For more information and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Hello and welcome to 6 Minute English. I'm Rob, and joining me in the studio today is Jennifer. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi there. Now, Rob, I believe our subject for discussion this week is a load of rubbish.
I wouldn't put it exactly like that. We are talking about rubbish, or to use another word, junk, and hearing some language about a subject that is out of this world. Space junk.
Yes, here on planet Earth we don't like seeing rubbish or litter on our streets, but in space the problem is far more serious and it could even be catastrophic, so it could lead to a serious disaster.
Well, we'll hear more about that in a moment, and also find out how scientists are going to clear up this mess. But before that, I think we should blast off with a space-related question. Now, did you know that the Russian satellite Sputnik was the first man-made object to be blasted into space? But do you know in which year it was launched? Was it A, 1957, B, 1960, or C, 1967?
I think it was in the 60s perhaps, so I'll say B, 1960.
OK, well, we'll find out if you're right at the end of the programme. So, we've mentioned that junk, or debris, floating around in space is a big problem. It can take a long time to tidy up your house, so imagine the challenge that lies ahead in tidying up the great mess in outer space. That's something that's been discussed at a recent conference on space debris in Germany.
Well, tidying up space is not something I would like to do. But how did all this rubbish end up floating about up there in the first place?
Good question. For the past 50 years, man has been sending objects like rockets and satellites into orbit. In fact, even now, around 70 satellites are sent into space every year. But when they're no longer needed, they're just left up there and not disposed of or put away somewhere where they won't cause harm. They were never designed to be brought back down to Earth.
These old fragments, or bits of technology, continue to circle the Earth and become a threat to spacecraft which are operating up there. In 2009, for example, 2 satellites accidentally hit each other, or collided, causing them to break into small pieces.
Well, that's added to the millions of small pieces of junk that are just floating around that might never be recovered, in other words, collected and brought back down to Earth. Let's hear more about this from Professor Richard Crowther, Chief Engineer at the UK Space Agency. What other issue does he compare this problem with?
Perhaps the most alarming factor is that even when we stop launching anything into orbit from now on, we would still see collisions occurring between satellites currently up there. But we recognise that if we want to actually actively manage this problem, we have to do something now. It's like global warming. We're not 100% certain that a certain scenario will occur, but we have a pretty good idea of what's dominating and what's influencing the evolution.
Professor Crowther mentioned an alarming factor, so a very worrying piece of information, that even if we didn't put any more objects into space, there's already a risk of the current satellites hitting each other. These satellites are the ones that we depend on for communications, for watching TV, weather forecasting, and for using satellite navigation, sat-navs.
Well, that's why he says we have to do something now. He predicts catastrophic or very bad collisions could occur every 5 to 9 years unless something is done. He compares the problem with global warming. It's serious. We're not sure what might happen in the future, but we do need to protect against it.
Well, maybe they need a huge vacuum cleaner. Or what about a giant magnet to gather up all that metal clutter?
I think you're talking rubbish or saying things that will never happen. But there are some more realistic ideas being developed, such as using nets, lasers to destroy the pieces of junk, and a harpoon to catch them.
It sounds like science fiction, something you just read about in stories. But are these ideas really being developed?
Yes, although research is in its very early stages. A harpoon could be fired at a redundant or no longer working satellite, and then it would be pulled downwards to burn up in the atmosphere.
But surely, up in space, lasers and harpoons might be thought of as weapons which could be used in a space war.
Well, according to Professor Richard Crowther, it is something that will need managing. What does he suggest?
If you've watched James Bond's films over the years, you know that anything with a harpoon, with a laser, with a net in space has potential to grab another spacecraft and destroy it. So what we need to do is build reassurance within the space community and demonstrate that the systems being proposed are peaceful in their nature, but also peaceful in the intent and the way in which they're going to be used.
He talked about reassuring or explaining that the new technology is of a peaceful nature. That means it's not for use in war or violence. He says the intent or the purpose behind it is good, not bad.
OK, well, there's one thing back on planet Earth that needs tidying up, and that's the answer to today's question. Earlier, I mentioned that the Russian satellite Sputnik was the first man-made object to be blasted into space. But did you know in which year it was launched?
And I said B, 1960?
And I'm afraid you were wrong.
Oh.
It was actually launched in 1957. OK, we're almost out of time now, so Jennifer, could you remind us of some of the words and phrases that we've heard today?
Yes, they were junk, mess, debris, disposed of, recovered, clutter, talking rubbish, redundant.
OK, let's get our feet back on the ground now and say farewell. Bye for now.
Bye.
That was 6 Minute English from bbclearningenglish.com.